According to Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund and the US League of Conservation Voters, the IPCC is composed of the world's leading scientists, leading climate scientists, and the world's brightest scientists. Now, where do those ideas come from? Well, we can trace them back actually to the very top of the IPCC itself. So the former chairman of the IPCC, Robert Watson, and the current chairman, Rajen Pachauri, has been going around, they've both been going around for many, many years saying the same thing. These are the world's best experts, they're the world's best specialists. And just to give you a full flavor of the kind of thing that Chairman Pachauri says these days, he says, these are people who have been chosen on the basis of their track record, on their record of publications, on the research that they have done. They are people who are at the top of their profession. So it would seem we have widespread consensus about who's writing IPCC reports. Journalists, energy sector publications, UN officials, green activists, IPCC spokespeople, everyone agrees these are the world's top scientists. Well, I'm an investigative journalist, and what that means is that rather than accepting someone's word, I actually go dig beneath the surface and try to find out if there's any evidence for claims that are being made. And when I started looking just a little underneath at who is actually writing IPCC reports, I found something quite different. And that's not to say that there have not been some brilliant scientists who have participated in the IPCC over the years. All I'm saying is that there are lots of other kinds of people writing IPCC reports, and they are not anywhere near the world's top scientists. So here's one group of people who've been writing IPCC reports. 20-something graduate students. Now, I have no problem with graduate students helping out the experts. I have no problem at all with that. But the IPCC has been making 20-something graduate students lead authors. And it's been doing so since the mid-1990s. And no one seems to have noticed this before. So Richard Klein, who is currently a geography professor in Holland, became an IPCC lead author at the tender age of 25. And 3 years later, the IPCC promoted him to coordinating lead author, which is a leadership position. It's in charge of an entire IPCC chapter. Now, he didn't complete his PhD until 2003. He wasn't one of the world's top scientists, not anywhere close. Laurens Bauer, who also works at a university in Holland, he became a lead author in 1999. And the problem with that is that he hadn't even earned his master's by then. He was not one of the world's top experts, not even close. And Sari Kovacs, now there are a number of other people that I discuss in my book, but I'm just giving you a snapshot here. Sari Kovacs is, I think, the most egregious example that I uncovered. Now, back in 1994, the IPCC decided that it wanted to examine how climate change might affect human health. And so of all the experts in the entire world, it chose 21 people to examine this very important question. And one of those people was Sari Kovacs. Now, this woman was not chosen on her publication record because, in fact, it would be 3 years later before her first academic paper was even published. She was not chosen because she was at the top of her field and a recognized expert, because in fact it would be 16 years before she even completed her doctorate. So who else has been writing IPCC reports? Well, I know this is very hard to believe, but people who have been appointed because they represent the right country or the right gender. We have to remember that the IPCC is a UN body, and the UN cares a great deal about things like diversity, gender balance, regional representation, the number of people who are coming from developing countries versus the number of people from developed economies. And so even though we've been told these are the world's top scientists, in fact, a great number of people are being appointed to IPCC lead author roles who are not qualified. And how do we know that? Because IPCC insiders have told us so. Last year, the Inter-Academy Council, which is an umbrella group of science academies from around the world, struck a committee to investigate the IPCC. That was a remarkable occurrence. Nothing like that had ever happened before. And the committee, as part of its information gathering process, posted online a questionnaire in which they asked people who had participated to give their opinion about questions like, how do you feel about, what's your opinion about how the IPCC selects its lead authors? And so these questionnaire answers were all gathered together. The names of the people doing the speaking were removed. The questionnaire answers were all gathered together. It's a massive document. It's 678 pages worth of questions and answers. And they're posted online. You can go to the IAC's website and download this massive document. And as early as page 16, someone says, some of the lead authors are clearly not qualified. And if you skip ahead 100 pages or so, you have someone saying, half the lead authors in my chapter were not competent, but they were politically correct appointments from developing countries. And then you skip ahead a few more 100 pages and you have someone else saying, and again, these are just the snapshots. There are lots of people saying these kinds of things. I'm just chosen 3. So this other person says, in their opinion, all IPCC personnel decisions are political before being scientific. So depending on whose opinion you believe, there's a problem with either some of the authors, half of the authors, or in fact, all of the authors are being chosen for reasons that have nothing to do with science, for reasons that are external to science. I think that's pretty shocking as a layperson. So who else is writing IPCC reports? Well, we have professional activists. We have people who are taking paychecks from green lobby groups. So Richard Moss is a great example. He's been involved with the IPCC for 20 years. He's considered a senior person there now. During part of that time, he was employed as a vice president with the World Wildlife Fund. Now, as a layperson, if I'm told that these are the top scientists in the world, I don't expect them to be employed by lobby groups. But that's what's been going on. Bill Hare is another good example. He's considered a Greenpeace legend. He has been a Greenpeace spokesperson since at least the early 1990s. And when AR4 was written, the 2007 IPCC report, he was one of only 40 people out of the thousands who were involved with that report who was on the core writing team. He helped write the synthesis report, that is the summary of summaries. Now, again, there are many more people. I'm just highlighting a few. I'm going to tell you about 2 other people. Michael Oppenheimer was employed for more than 2 decades by the Environmental Defense Fund, which is a very large, very wealthy green lobby group in the United States. He continues to advise them, and right now he is leading an AR5 chapter. Jennifer Morgan, she looks like a very pleasant person. I'm sure she would be quite a nice person to have coffee with. But Jennifer Morgan is not one of the world's finest scientific minds. Jennifer Morgan's career has consisted of going from one green group to another, working as a lobbyist. And for a while, she was, in fact, the WWF's chief spokesperson on climate change. Somehow, the IPCC decided that she should work on AR5, that she qualifies as one of the world's finest scientific minds. I'm not sure how that happened. Now, the influence of green groups on the IPCC takes another form as well. It's not just people who are employed by green groups. I discovered something rather remarkable, and that's that in 2004, just around the time that work on AR4 was beginning, the WWF began to systematically recruit IPCC personnel. And by 2008, according to internal documents that are available on the web, this is not a secret, They claimed that they had persuaded 130 people that they described as leading climate scientists, mostly, but not exclusively, from the IPCC to join their panel. So what this means is at the very time that scientists involved in the IPCC have been entrusted to examine in a neutral and objective and impartial way very important scientific questions around climate change, at that very time these people chose to get into bed with the WWF in a very public way. So what does that mean? What did that look like? What were the implications for AR4? It means that in AR4, 2/3 of the chapters contained at least one and as many as 9 personnel who have formal public affiliation with the WWF. It means that 1/3 were actually being led by a WWF affiliated scientist. There was a particular chapter that produced a very dramatic finding. It's a finding that Chairman Pachauri likes to mention all of the time in his speeches, and that finding was that 20 to 30% of the species on the planet are threatened by climate change. Well, the chapter in which that conclusion was reached was led by 2 people with WWF affiliations and 8 other people affiliated with the WWF. So if the IPCC stacks that particular chapter with 8 people who have affiliations with the WWF, are we really surprised that the result was that they think that climate change is a big concern for species extinction? Now, this is a brand new book. This is a newborn book. It's less than 6 weeks old. And about week number 2 or week number 3, the WWF was so concerned about the fact that I was saying that it had infiltrated the IPCC that they issued a press release from head office. And they said, oh, it's just a bit of overlap. It's not, we didn't infiltrate, it's just a bit of overlap. No worries. Well, from my perspective, if 2/3 of your chapters have WWF people and 1/3 are being led by WWF people, that's not a bit of overlap. That's an invasion. You have been compromised as an organization, in my view. So who really writes IPCC reports? Students, unqualified scientists, professional activists, and then a very large group of scientists who are so unsophisticated and so naive that they don't understand that at the very moment that they're supposed to be neutral and objective is not the moment to be getting into bed with green groups. Okay, the IPCC reports are assessments. These people look at the science and decide which science is more persuasive. A great deal of what the IPCC does depends on good judgment. Now, it seems to me that scientists who don't understand that they stop looking impartial the moment they start hanging around with the WWF don't have very good judgment. I would say their judgment is impaired. So those are not the kind of people I think should be writing IPCC reports. So what does this mean? It means that we have a widespread consensus, apparently not just about climate science, but about a very simple question: who's writing IPCC reports? And that consensus is simply dead wrong. It's profoundly mistaken. And yet, the entire world thinks that this is true. So I spend an entire book talking about other claims that the IPCC has made and that have been accepted at face value by everyone out there, particularly by the media who covers these topics. And I found that all of these are highly questionable as well. So the notion that the IPCC is an utterly transparent organization, Chairman Pachauri likes to say everything we do is open to scrutiny. No, in fact, that's not the case. I came to that conclusion independently on my own. I think Chris Horner is here and he will be speaking tomorrow, and he came to that conclusion on his own. The IAC report that was released last year they said the IPCC has serious transparency problems as well. So the claim that they're utterly transparent, no, that's not the case. The claim that policies and procedures are followed rigorously, I'm having a hard time finding a single rule that the IPCC did follow. Really, truly, practically everything I examine, these people don't follow the rules. They just don't. They may as well not be there, these rules. And then we have another doozy, and that's the claim that the IPCC reports are based solely on peer-reviewed literature. And Chairman Pachauri likes to go around the world. He's done so for many years now, saying we look only at peer-reviewed literature. We don't settle for anything less. If it hasn't been published in a peer-reviewed journal, we can just throw it into the dustbin. These are his words. And it turns out that about a year and a half ago, I organized an audit. 40 people from around the world who were reading my blog helped me examine the references that appear at the back of the IPCC report at the end of every chapter. There are 44 chapters. It was quite a job. And what we discovered was that about 30%, 1 in 3 of those references, those citations, are not to peer-reviewed literature. There is a huge gap. 70% versus 100% is a huge gap. This is not, a rounding error. So there are wider implications. And what this says to me is that there were hundreds of people involved in the IPCC over many years who know darn well that many of the authors are not the world's top scientists. There are hundreds of people who knew that Pachauri was going around claiming that it was 100% peer-reviewed and that was not remotely true. And yet no one spoke up. No one set the record straight. Climate scientists like to write open letters. And there's all kinds of open letters from climate scientists telling the world and telling politicians what they should be doing about climate change. There has not been a single open letter from scientists saying, we support the IPCC, but some of the things that the organization is telling the public is not true, and we need to be honest about that. No one felt that they should be challenging the IPCC, even though they were in a position to know that the IPCC was making false claims. I think that tells us something about the integrity of the organization and about the integrity of the leadership, and it's not a good conclusion. So I essentially conclude in my book that the IPCC does not describe its own personnel, its own reports, or its own procedures accurately. And if it can't even do those simple things, if it gets those simple things wrong, then it has no credibility. I don't think we should be trusting it on really complicated matters. And I'm a layperson, but that's how it looks to me. Thank you very much.